My boss made me fire myself. Literally. And I didn't even see it coming until it was too late. Before I get into how I ended up betrayed by everyone I trusted at work, hit that subscribe button if you want more real stories like this, the kind no one dares to say out loud in a team meeting. Let me set the scene. I worked at a mid-sized tech company in Austin. Not a startup, not quite corporate, but toxic in the way only a company pretending not to be corporate can be. You know the type. Ping pong tables and free kombucha in the kitchen, but no clear path to promotion. All smiles during team huddles, but God help you if you speak up in one. I was a senior project manager in the product division. My direct boss, Julia, was a classic smile while she stabs you type. Friendly on Slack, passive-aggressive in meetings. And then there was Kayla, our team lead for UX, my supposed work best friend. We'd vent during walks, cover for each other when we needed a break, and joke about the office politics. I thought we were a team. I thought I was safe. Until Julia called me into her office one Tuesday morning. She had this unreadable expression, like she was trying to hide a smirk. She told me I was being given the opportunity to restructure my team due to budget cuts. Guess who she asked me to let go? Myself. I laughed, thinking she was joking. She wasn't. "We believe you're best positioned to understand how this role is no longer essential," she said. As if I was supposed to agree with her and sign my own pink slip. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely breathe. My palms were sweating through the cuffs of my shirt. And I hadn't even discovered the real betrayal yet. I walked out of Julia's office in a daze. The hallway buzzed with that fake productivity hum, keyboards clacking, phones ringing, people laughing at something on Slack. Meanwhile, my career was being yanked out from under me by the people I trusted most. I didn't even go back to my desk. I went straight to the rooftop, where Kayla and I usually ate lunch when we needed a break from the madness downstairs. She was already up there, sipping from her obnoxious Stanley cup like it was just another Tuesday. "I just had the weirdest meeting with Julia," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Kayla raised an eyebrow. "Oh?" She asked me to recommend my own position for termination. "Budget cuts," she said. And then she framed it like I should be proud of the opportunity to lead by example. There was a pause. And then Kayla said something I'll never forget. "Maybe it's for the best. You've been burnt out for months." I froze. That's not what a friend says. That's not what anyone says unless they already knew. And then it clicked. The after-hours meetings she had with Julia that she brushed off. The sudden shift in her attitude over the past 2 weeks. The fact that she'd been unusually quiet during our one-on-ones. She knew. Hell, she was probably in on it. The betrayal stung worse than the termination. I had confided in her, my fears, my burnout, my doubts. I had helped her prep for every performance review, backed her ideas in meetings, even covered for her when she was late after weekend benders. And now? She was just watching me drown. Maybe she even handed Julia the stone to tie around my neck. I didn't say another word. I just stood there, feeling my stomach drop as the wind picked up around us, and wondered how many others were smiling in my face while plotting behind my back. By the time I made it back to my desk, my monitor was already locked. I hadn't logged out. I knew I hadn't. IT had disabled my access before I even left the rooftop. That was the moment I stopped hoping this was all some misunderstanding. I checked my phone. One new email. Subject: Voluntary Separation Process, Next Steps. From our@com. Voluntary. I let out a bitter laugh. Inside was a link to a digital exit packet, already filled out with my name, ID number, and even a drafted statement of resignation, written in my voice. It read like something I might say. Professional. Grateful. Obedient. Creepy. I walked straight to HR. Denise, our HR rep, greeted me like I just stopped in to grab a snack. "I assume you've seen the email," she said, smiling that tight corporate smile they teach in trainings. "This was planned. All of it," I said, trying to keep the shaking out of my voice. "Why didn't anyone talk to me first?" Her expression didn't change. "This decision was made with consideration of your recent feedback and your self-reported burnout. Julia shared that you were open to transitioning out." That's when the ground dropped beneath me. I had filled out a mental health survey weeks ago, one of those anonymous feedback forms the company pretended to care about. I had been honest. Said I felt stretched thin. That I didn't feel seen. That I was worried about my team's direction. They'd used my honesty against me. Weaponized my vulnerability. Denise handed me a manila envelope. Severance offer. Standard NDA. If you sign today, she said, you get a positive reference and 2 months pay. If not. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. I stared down at the documents, my pulse thudding in my ears. I wasn't just being pushed out, they were making me agree to it, like it was my idea. Like I was the problem. I realized then, I wasn't dealing with people. I was dealing with a machine that had already decided what role I was going to play, and they'd written the script without me. I didn't sign. Not yet. I tucked the envelope under my arm, left HR's office, and walked until I ended up in my car, still parked in the same spot I'd been using for 4 years. The familiarity of it stung, like it didn't get the memo that I was now disposable. I sat in silence, engine off, trying to piece it all together. Every instinct in me wanted to believe this was some kind of mistake. But deep down, I already knew it wasn't. And then it hit me. The promotion. Just 2 months ago, Julia had called me into her office to discuss my potential trajectory. She had hinted at a lead PM role opening soon. Told me my last project, the one I built from scratch, had impressed upper management. She said, it's yours if you stay sharp. That project, a full integration roadmap for one of our biggest clients, had taken me 3 months of late nights and weekends. I had led the planning, managed the budget, handled the client freakouts, even trained Kayla on the UX alignment because she was falling behind. It was my baby. And suddenly I remembered something else. Last week, in the Monday stand-up, Julia had casually mentioned, Kayla will be taking point on the rollout for the new system. My rollout. At the time, I'd raised an eyebrow. Kayla shrugged and said, Julia asked me to get more involved. Didn't think you'd mind. I didn't protest. Why would I? We were a team. Now, it was all clear. They took my work. Reassigned credit. Used my own words and worries against me. And when I was no longer useful, they packaged it all up in a neat little HR envelope and called it voluntary. I wasn't just being let go. I was being erased. And worst of all? They knew I wouldn't fight back. They knew I'd been too tired, too loyal, too conditioned to play nice. But maybe they miscalculated. Because sitting there in my car, staring at the building that once felt like my second home, something in me shifted. I wasn't going to disappear quietly. The next morning, I showed up early. Ridiculously early. Before sunrise. Before anyone from HR. Before Julia, even before IT unlocked half the floors. I still had my badge, and I knew from habit which side door sensors rebooted last. I didn't know exactly what I was looking for. But I knew where to start. My old laptop had been locked, sure. But the intern laptop cards in the training room? Those were always left unsecured for onboarding. And I still knew the Wi-Fi credentials and internal portal URLs by heart. I wasn't planning on hacking anything. I didn't need to. All I needed was access to the Share Team folder, the one where project planning docs and meeting notes were kept. And there it was. A folder labeled Transition Planning, Q3. I opened it. Inside were subfolders for different departments. I clicked on Product. There it was, a document titled Role Realignment, Draft. Dated 3 weeks ago. The document listed my name, a summary of my responsibilities, and a section titled Redistribution Plan. It was mapped out line by line, who would take over which parts of my work, which clients would be reassigned to Kayla, and even a note that said, commence soft offboarding process week of 6/12. Use employees' burnout feedback as framing device. Framing device. Like my exhaustion was just a convenient plot point in their little PR story. And at the bottom? An internal email chain between Julia and Denise from HR. No sugarcoating. No fluff. Just brutal honesty. He's too expensive to justify. Kayla's cheaper, and frankly easier to manage. Let's incentivize a voluntary exit and keep it clean. I stared at those words like they were fire. My heart was racing again. But not with fear this time, with clarity. They wanted a clean exit. A silent goodbye. No noise. No questions. But they had underestimated me. They thought I would burn out quietly. They thought I wouldn't have it in me to fight back. They were wrong. By 9:15 a.m., the office was alive again. Fake laughs, tapping keyboards, the smell of burnt espresso wafting from the break room. I was back at my desk like nothing had happened, the borrowed intern laptop stashed under a hoodie in my backpack. I had everything I needed now. I just needed to see her. Kayla strutted in like she always did, high ponytail, oversized tote bag, oat milk latte. She gave me that same sugary smile and said, "You're in early." I looked at her and for a second, I almost said nothing. But then I asked, calm as ever, "Hey, random question. When did Julia ask you to take over the rollout?" She blinked, hesitated just long enough. "Oh, maybe a week ago? She just thought I could help lighten your load a bit." I nodded. "Right. Lighten my load." She kept sipping her coffee, avoiding eye contact now. I leaned in a little. "Did she also tell you I was going to be let go?" Her lips parted like she was about to deny it, but the lie caught in her throat. Her eyes flicked away. That silence was louder than any confession. "You knew," I said, quieter this time. "You knew and you smiled in my face. You let me coach you through the project that you were going to steal. You let me write the deck you pitched as your own last Friday." She looked pale now. "It's not like that. I didn't have a choice. She told me it was either I step up or risk redundancy. I didn't want to lose my job. And I guess losing mine was fine," I said, my voice flat. There it was, the honest truth. It wasn't personal to her. It was survival. But it was personal to me. I had given years to this job, carried people through deadlines, sacrificed weekends and birthdays for this team, and now I was watching a friend climb over me like a rung on a ladder. I stood up, collected my things, and walked out without saying another word. Let her wonder what I was planning. Because the next step? I wasn't just going to make noise, I was going to leave a scar they couldn't spin into a transition. That afternoon, I went home and pulled out an old external hard drive I hadn't touched in years. It still had backups from my earlier projects, timelines, audio notes, even a few casual Zoom recordings I'd saved by accident when I was testing a screen recorder tool. It was one of those videos that stopped me cold. It was a call from 2 months back. Just me, Julia, and Kayla. I'd set the meeting up to walk them through the final framework for the integration project, the one Julia had later assigned entirely to Kayla without crediting me. The call had been casual. We were laughing, joking, I even remember apologizing for being a bit fried lately. And then Julia said something that, at the time, seemed harmless. "Well, if this goes well, you'll finally get that promotion I keep teasing you about." I had smiled. Kayla laughed too, even congratulated me in advance. Now I knew it was all fake. But the recording didn't stop there. Toward the end, when I briefly left the call to grab a charger, I had left the recording running. Julia thought I had logged off, and in the 30 seconds I was away, she said. "He's barely keeping it together. Let's give Kayla more of the reins so we're not left scrambling if he flakes out." Kayla didn't object. She just said, "Sure, I can handle it. I mean, if he burns out, someone has to keep this ship afloat." That was the moment the knife went in. This wasn't just corporate coldness. This was premeditated replacement. While I was working myself to exhaustion, trying to make this project perfect, they were already planning for me to fail, and to let Kayla rise from my ashes. I watched that recording 3 times. My hands were shaking. But I also realized something else. That clip, short as it was, proved everything. It wasn't just words, it showed intent, timing, the false promises, the betrayal. It was calm, clear, and unmistakably damaging. And with that, I had leverage. They had built this whole story to make it look like I chose to leave. But this video? It showed the truth. It was the crack in their perfect narrative. Now, I just needed to decide where to aim it. The next morning, I didn't sneak in early. I walked in at 10:03 a.m., coffee in one hand, envelope in the other, like it was just another day. People glanced up from their monitors, confused, maybe even nervous. Word had gotten around that I was transitioning out. No one expected to see me again. Good. I went straight to Julia's office. Didn't knock. She looked up from her laptop, that same tight smile forming, but I cut her off before she could fake a greeting. "We need to talk. Privately." Her eyes narrowed, but she nodded. "Of course." I closed the door behind me. Took a breath. Then I placed the flash drive on her desk. "What's this?" she asked. "Proof," I said. "Proof that this entire process was premeditated. That you lied to me, used my mental health against me, stole my project, and passed it off as a budget cut. She didn't move. Just stared at the flash drive like it might explode. I continued. I have a recording. From our Zoom meeting 2 months ago. You promised me the lead role. And after I stepped away for 30 seconds, you and Kayla started discussing how to replace me. That was the same week you told HR I was a burnout risk. Her face tightened. You shouldn't be recording internal. I didn't mean to. It was automatic. But it's legal. And now it's mine. A long silence stretched between us. Then I dropped the real hammer. I've drafted an email. I haven't sent it yet, but it includes the recording, that realignment doc from the shared drive, and a timeline of everything. It's addressed to the VP of Operations, the Ethics Committee, and, just for fun, 2 journalists I happen to follow on LinkedIn. Julia leaned back slowly in her chair. Her confidence was slipping now. Her fingers tapped the desk, a tell I'd seen before, usually when she was cornered. What do you want? She asked, finally. There it was. The shift. The admission, buried in that one question. I didn't smile. I didn't blink. I want what you owe me. And I want my name cleared. She didn't answer right away. But in her eyes, I could already see it. She knew she'd lost control of the story. And for the first time in weeks, I felt like I was finally writing it myself. Julia stared at me for a long moment. Her corporate mask slipped just slightly, just enough for me to see the panic underneath. Then she shifted into strategy mode. That cold, practiced calm she always used when clients got difficult. I think we've had a misalignment of expectations, she said carefully. Let's not escalate something that can still be resolved with discretion. Discretion. A fancy word for hush money. She opened her desk drawer, pulled out a slim folder, and slid it across the desk. HR has been working on a revised exit package, she said. We're willing to offer 4 months of severance, extended health benefits, and a neutral reference. In exchange, you agree not to pursue any further internal or external communications. I opened the folder. 4 months pay. They were scared. And I could tell, this wasn't sanctioned by HR. This was her playing defense, trying to contain the damage before it reached higher up. I looked her in the eyes. You really think that's going to make this go away? She smiled, thin, tight. It usually does. The confidence in her voice made my skin crawl. This wasn't a misunderstanding, I said, standing up. You lied. You manipulated. And you used the language of mental health to push someone out quietly, not because I failed, but because I made you uncomfortable. You were unpredictable, she snapped suddenly, voice sharper now. That makes you a liability. There it was. The truth. I nodded slowly. That recording? It's not just about me. It's about the system you run here. And I'm guessing I'm not the only one who's ended up with a knife in their back. I walked out of her office without touching the folder. That afternoon, I sent an email. Not to the press, not yet. I sent it to 2 people, the VP of Operations and the company's internal ethics officer. Subject line, formal complaint, retaliation, misconduct, and constructive termination evidence enclosed. The message was simple. No threats. Just facts. Attachments. Dates. Names. And the video. By the end of the day, I had a read receipt from both. Let the silence begin to work on them. Because when powerful people go quiet, that's when the real tremors start. 2 days passed. No response. No acknowledgement. Just silence, the cold, corporate kind that says we're circling the wagons. Then, late Friday afternoon, my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. I answered. Hello? Hi, this is Karen Singh, VP of Operations at, company name. I received your email. Her voice was polite, but crisp, the kind that's used to delivering hard truths without flinching. She didn't waste time. I've reviewed the materials. I'd like to speak with you directly, off the record for now. Are you available Monday morning? I paused. Off the record meant, let's talk before this turns into something official, or legal. I'm available, I said. 9 a.m. When I walked into the building that Monday, I wasn't an employee anymore, at least not in the eyes of HR. But I still had a badge. No one had deactivated it yet. Maybe they didn't want the optics of marching me out. Or maybe they thought I wouldn't show. I was escorted to a glass-walled conference room where Karen sat waiting. She didn't smile when I walked in. She simply said, Thank you for coming. She had the recording pulled up on her laptop already. She had notes, detailed ones. Let me be clear, she began, what I heard on this call was deeply concerning. The language used by Julia and Kayla, the manipulation of your mental health feedback, the planning that occurred behind closed doors, none of it aligns with our stated values. She let that hang for a second. Now, she continued, what outcome are you looking for? Finally. The question that meant I had power in the room. I looked her in the eyes. First, I said, I want a formal retraction of my voluntary exit. In writing. I want my termination documented for what it was, a forced removal built on false pretenses. She nodded slowly, taking notes. Second, I want Julia held accountable. You claim to have zero tolerance for retaliation, and I just handed you textbook evidence of it. Karen said nothing, just kept writing. And third, I want compensation that reflects what I lost. My project. My promotion. My reputation. And I want it without being gagged by an NDA. Now she looked up. No NDA? That's right. Silence. Then, she closed her notebook. I'll need to speak with legal. But based on what I've reviewed so far, you'll get what you're asking for. She stood, extended her hand. Thank you for speaking up. I didn't shake her hand. Because I wasn't done yet. Outside that room, people still thought I had quit. That I'd been too weak to handle the pressure. That was about to change. That same afternoon, just hours after my meeting with Karen, HR sent out an all-company email titled, Team Update, Product Department. The message was short, sterile, and dripping with spin. We wish, my name, the best in his future endeavors after his voluntary decision to move on. His contributions to the Q2 integration project were appreciated, and we're excited for Kayla to continue leading the initiative forward. Voluntary decision. They were still clinging to the story like it hadn't already collapsed. I stared at the email, reading it 3 times. My pulse thumped in my jaw. Not because it surprised me, but because it didn't. They weren't sorry. They were trying to clean the blood off the floor before anyone noticed. So I responded. Not to everyone. Just to the 5 people who mattered, my direct team, the engineers I fought for, and 2 junior PMs who had confided in me about their own frustrations with leadership. Subject line. Setting the record straight, my departure. Body. I've seen the internal message about my voluntary departure. I'd like to clarify that I did not choose to leave. I was pressured out after being systematically undermined, gaslit, and replaced without transparency. I have documentation and recordings to support this, which have been submitted to executive leadership and HR for formal review. I won't name names or air every detail, but if you've ever felt isolated, silenced, or replaced without reason, I want you to know you're not imagining it. Sometimes the system rewards the quiet. I chose not to be quiet. I hit send. Within minutes, my phone started buzzing. First, from one of the junior PMs. Dude. You said what we've all wanted to say for years. Respect. Then from one of the senior engineers. We knew something was off. Kayla's been shady as hell. Good on you. By the end of the day, a quiet ripple had become something bigger. Engineers were forwarding the message. My name was suddenly being spoken with something new behind it, respect. I wasn't a burnout. I wasn't weak. I was the guy who said what no one else dared to. And for the first time since this whole nightmare started, I didn't feel alone. The email had barely been lit for 24 hours when I got a message that made me stop in my tracks. It was from someone I hadn't heard from in almost a year, Nathan, a former engineering manager who had left abruptly without warning. No farewell lunch, no LinkedIn post. Just gone. His message was short. Saw your email. Same thing happened to me. Let me know if you want receipts. I messaged back immediately. What do you mean? He responded with a PDF. Inside was a thread of emails between Julia, HR, and the CTO at the time. Nathan had apparently pushed back on Kayla being fast-tracked into leadership without proper experience. In his message, he had cited concerns about favoritism and lack of documentation. 1 week later, he was called in for a realignment discussion. 2 days after that, his role was phased out. Sound familiar? But it wasn't just that. Nathan had filed an internal complaint, a formal one. The result? Nothing. No investigation. No follow-up. Just a generic HR response that said, "We appreciate your feedback and are committed to fostering a respectful environment." He left voluntarily because he saw what was coming. And because they didn't want his version of the truth spreading. But now, his documents, along with mine, painted a pattern. Julia wasn't just a one-time manipulator. She was a repeat offender, protected by silence and spin. Nathan gave me permission to forward his documentation to the ethics committee. So I did. And within 2 days, I got a message from Karen. "Thank you for the additional material. An independent audit of management practices is being initiated, effective immediately. Your cooperation has been noted and is greatly appreciated." That was the moment I knew. They weren't sweeping this one under the rug. This wasn't just about my story anymore. This was bigger, and I had just lit the match. Programa Chat GPT Skazala, white checkmark emoji, YouTube Workplace Drama Series, Part 13 title, "The Audit Uncovered More Than I Expected." 3 weeks passed. I wasn't at the office anymore, but the fallout kept reaching me. Whispered DMs, anonymous LinkedIn messages, even a few calls from coworkers who had never dared speak up before. The audit had gone deep. Deeper than anyone thought it would. Apparently, once the ethics committee started digging into HR's handling of complaints over the past 18 months, they found a disturbing pattern, not just mine or Nathan's. At least 4 other employees had submitted complaints about Julia and her clique of inner circle managers. Every one of them had been quietly pushed out, ignored, or offered settlements to move on peacefully. Most of them hadn't wanted to fight. They were burned out, humiliated, or just relieved to be gone. But now? The company had a problem. A real one. I was contacted by a woman named Elaine, an independent investigator hired from outside the company. She asked if I'd be willing to do a formal interview under confidentiality. I agreed. She listened, took notes, asked all the right questions. Then, right before signing off, she looked me dead in the eye over Zoom and said, "You're not the first. But you might be the one who finally makes it stop." It hit me like a brick. For months, I'd felt like I was spiraling. Like I'd lost control of my life, my career, my worth. But now I was the start of something. A reckoning. A course correction. Word eventually got back to me through the grapevine. Kayla had been placed on administrative leave. Julia too. Both pending the outcome of the investigation. And for the first time in a long time, I breathed. Not just because they were gone, but because the truth had weight. And I was finally watching it crush the right people. Just as I started to find peace, thinking my part in this story was over, I got an email I never expected. Subject: Private follow-up, CEO request. At first, I thought it was a prank. But the domain was legit, and the signature belonged to Stephen Clark, our CEO, someone I'd seen in company-wide webinars but never spoken to directly. His assistant had scheduled a one-on-one Zoom for that Friday. I joined with my heart in my throat. Stephen looked tired. Not the polished executive I remembered, but someone weighed down. After a short greeting, he jumped straight into it. "I've read the full reports. What happened to you, to others, should have never been allowed to happen. I want to personally apologize." He didn't spin it. He didn't deflect. He took responsibility, which, frankly, shocked me. Then came the part that left me speechless. "We're restructuring. HR leadership is being replaced. We're also forming a new internal integrity board, and I want you to be on it." I froze. Me? The guy they tried to silence? Stephen continued. "You stood up. You held your ground when most wouldn't. We need that voice, not just in cleanup, but in culture rebuilding." I didn't answer right away. I told him I needed time. Part of me wanted to say yes, to help build something better. Part of me still felt the sting of betrayal. Could I really go back? Later that night, I sat alone, rereading every message, every file, every email that had brought me to this point. The chaos, the sleepless nights, the self-doubt. And the overwhelming clarity that, despite it all, I was still standing. Not as a victim, but as a catalyst. Looking back, the whole ordeal feels surreal, like living someone else's nightmare and fighting to wake up. The betrayal, the lies, the gaslighting. It chipped away at my confidence, my health, and my sense of belonging. But it also taught me something powerful. I learned that no matter how toxic the environment, No matter how clever the manipulation, the truth has a way of breaking through the cracks. Standing up wasn't easy. It meant risking my career, my reputation, and my peace of mind. But silence would have been a slow death. I learned who my real allies were, not the ones who smiled behind my back, but the ones who quietly stood with me when it mattered most. Most importantly, I learned that no job is worth losing yourself over. Toxic workplaces thrive on keeping people isolated and powerless. The moment you refuse to be a victim is the moment they start to lose control. If you've ever felt powerless at work, don't let it stay that way. Speak up. Gather your proof. Find your support. And most of all, believe in your own worth. Because no promotion, no paycheck, no team is worth your peace. Thank you for listening to my story. If you want more real stories that pull back the curtain on workplace drama and the truths no one tells in meetings, hit that subscribe button. You're not alone.